North Star fourth graders. This is Miss Gorilla coming live from the east side of St. Paul. Ready to record our second math video. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen so we can see our slides and get her going. Remember, you can always replay these videos when you're doing your work to rewatch and remind yourself of what you learned. Okay, so today is April 8th, 2020. Our I can use a number line or timeline to display a data set. Today we're specifically going to focus in on timelines. So where have you seen timelines or number lines before? So think about, we've used them for rounding. You did that a couple weeks ago on your packets. So if you notice, these number lines are both vertical and horizontal. So vertical up and down, or they can be horizontal side to side. We've also seen number lines with fractions, right? You're really good at putting your fractions on number lines. So you might have also seen timelines before in maybe in reading class, maybe in guided reading class. So timelines follow the same rules as number lines. We're going to touch on those. So how are they similar? What do you notice? Take a look at the timeline, take a look at the number line. Start to think to yourself, what are some of the things that you notice are similar between the two? So I noticed that they have equally spaced lines or like hashes that are labeled. So on the timeline, it goes from 1850 to 1900 to 1950 to 2000, and they're equally spaced, right? It almost looks like a tape diagram. And then up here for our number line, we have equally spaced pieces again. Between we have 400, 450, 500, 2000, 2500, 3000. They have points that are plotted. So the dots are called the points. So there's dots or points on our timeline and dots and points on our number line, and they're labeled. So on the number line, they're labeled with a number. On the timeline, they're labeled with a number as well for the year. And then this one has some information. Sometimes they'll have that. And then there's labels. So there's usually on in the timeline, there's a title. So this title is the Civil Rights Movement. There may not be titles on number lines. There is a beginning and end for number lines and timelines. So the beginning of our timeline is 1850, the end is 2000. Look at our number line beginning 400 to 500, an end, and then beginning 2000 and 3000. And they all both have points. Good. So what do we use number lines and timelines for? It's another way to display information or a data set, like we learned the other day. You can use number lines for rounding, and you can use them to compare whole numbers and fractions, right? So a number line or a timeline makes it easy to compare like values. So if you're looking at a timeline, you can compare like the years or the order of events, like what came first, what came next, what was last, right? So you already know how to create number lines, answer questions about number lines. So now we're going to use the same knowledge to answer questions about a timeline. Okay, so let's take a look at this timeline. First step, you're going to read the title. So the title of this timeline is Amelia Earhart's Life. Then you're going to look at the beginning and the end values or numbers. So look at the beginning, it starts in 1890 and it ends in 1940. Okay, so just like that, we look at the beginning, we look at the end. We want to understand about how long are we looking at for a time frame. So if you want to do the math of 1940 minus 1890, that's going to tell you how many years this timeline covers. I know if I add 10 to 1890, that'll get me to 1900. And then that's 1900 to 1940 is just 40 more. Or these are just blocks of 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So it's a 50-year timeline. So that kind of brings us to the next point. You determine the scale or the frequency. So how much is in between each line here? So we jumped from 1890 to 1900, 1900 to 1910, 1910 to 1920. See that? So you can see 10, 20, 30, 40. So I know it's increasing, or there's 10 years in between each space. Okay. And then the last step, you look closer at the points on the timeline, read the information, and think about what they mean. So the first point here says Amelia Earhart is born in Atchison, Kansas, 1897. The next point here, follow the line up to the box. Earhart volunteers as a nurse during World War I, 1917. Next dot, follow the line to the box. Earhart buys her first aircraft, the Canary, 1921. Next line, next dot, follow the line. Earhart sets a world record for flying 14,000 feet high in 1922. Next dot, follow the line. Earhart becomes the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean in 1932. Fly solo meant she flew by herself. And the last dot, Earhart disappears while trying to fly around the world. She's never seen again in 1937. So there's all of our information. And then the last step, usually when we're working with timelines, is we're going to answer some questions about them. So let's look at number 1. Which happened earlier? A, Earhart buys her first aircraft, or B, Earhart set world record for flying 14,000 feet. So I'm going to look at my timeline and see, where does she buy her first aircraft? So that was when she was born. This is when she volunteered as a nurse. This says Earhart buys her first aircraft. Okay, so she bought her first aircraft in 1921, and I just came across that dot. Now let's see what the next dot says. Earhart sets the world record for flying 14,000 feet in 1922. So I know that she bought her first aircraft. I know that that came first or happened earlier because that year is 1921 and then the next year is 1922. And the smaller number means it happened first or it was earlier. So I'm going to put A for my answer. Number 2, how many years earlier after Earhart became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean alone did she disappear? So I know this dot was talking about she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. That was 1932. So now she disappeared. That's the next dot in 1937. So 1932 to 1937. How many years went by between those 2 points on our timeline? So let's think 1932, 1933, 34, 35, 36, 37. That was 5 years went by between these 2 dots. So I put my answer 5 years. What year was she born? Here's my dot, 1897. Type it in, 1897. And I'll do one more. What year was she a volunteer as a nurse? So find the box. Earhart volunteered as a nurse during World War I in 1917. So I just wrote 1917. So your answers can look a lot of different ways. You might be writing years. You might be writing some other information, some numbers, some letters. So pay close attention to your questions for what your answers should look like. Okay. So now let's take a quick look at the work you're going to be doing. So this is going to be your first worksheet you're going to work on by yourself. So I want you to notice this is another version of a timeline, but see how it's vertical, it's up and down. And the beginning is at the top, see 1954, and the end is at the bottom, 2009. So when the numbers get bigger, that's the end because it's closer to like the most current year. Okay, so this says the timeline of Sonia Sotomayor's life so far. Sonia Sotomayor is the first Latina Supreme Court justice in the United States history. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the country, meaning its decisions on court cases are final. The justices are nominated by the president and serve a lifetime appointment after the Senate approves their nomination. Directions: use the timeline about Sonia Sotomayor's life to answer questions about her. So, question number 1. What event happened after Sonia Sotomayor joined the law firm of Pavia and Harcourt? So, before I jump into my questions, let's think back to our steps that we talked about on our PowerPoint. Here's our title on the top, the timeline of Sonia Sotomayor's life so far. Let's look at our beginning is 1954 and our end is 2009. Let's kind of look at, is there a scale that they follow on this timeline? Looks like it's not consistent because 54 to 61, what's that? 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61. That's 7 years. And then from 61 to 63 is 2 years. 63 to 66 is 3 years. So we know that this timeline is not really following a specific scale that's like increasing by 2s or 5s. So we just want to pay close attention to our years when we're answering questions. And then let's look at some of the information. So this was when she was born. She was diagnosed with diabetes. Her father died. Got a set of encyclopedias. Graduated from high school. Graduated from Princeton. Graduated from Yale Law School. Became an assistant district attorney in New York County. Joined the law firm of Pavia and Harcourt. Became a U.S. District Court judge for the Southern District of New York. Joined the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit as a judge. Nominated by President Barack Obama to be a U.S. Supreme Court Associate Justice on May 28th. Sworn in as the 11th Justice of the Supreme Court on August 8th. Okay, so now I've read through all my information, so now I'll go back and start answering my questions. And I feel like that's going to help you answer your questions a little bit faster because you're going to remember, like, right about where the information was. So, what event happened after Sonia Sotomayor joined the law firm of Pavia and Harcourt? What event happened after? So, let's go down to our timeline. So, she joined the law firm of Pavia and Harcourt after, remember, we said it's moving forward is going down or like farther into the future. So, she became a U.S. District Court judge for the Southern District of New York. See if I can paste that right here. There we go. Okay, so you'll write that down on yours. So just like that, you're going to answer questions, the rest of these questions. And then we're going to go down here, right on the lines, the missing information from this piece of the timeline. So they took just a certain chunk of the timeline from right above here. You're going to fill in the missing information. So copy what's missing from the timeline above. Number 5, do some research about Sonia Sotomayor. What events would you like to add to the timeline? What events would you eliminate? If you have time, this is extra credit. Number 5 can be extra credit. So if you have time to look up a little bit more about her life, you can add it to the timeline. You could maybe insert it, like write the date or the year here and some information. Maybe find 1 or 2 more pieces of information about her life, maybe about her personally. Okay, so that's your first page you're practicing on. This is the next page, placing events on a timeline. Determine which letter best represents the location the event should occur on the timeline. Not all the letters will be used. So let's read our title, Appliance Origins. So appliances are like your fridge, your stove, your dryer, that kind of thing. Origins, so when they started, okay? Let's look at our beginning, 1900, our end, 1935, okay? Let's look at our scale, 1900, 1905, 1910, 1950, 1920. See how it's going up by 5? So each of these little blocks is worth 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So from 1900 to 1935. So we're looking at a little time window of 35 years, okay? Now let's start to answer our questions. So if you notice, there's the points, right? But they have the letters and they don't have any information for us to read. So we need to go read the questions and figure out where this information would go on our timeline. So the first electric stove is introduced by Hot Point. So in 1910. So where would 1910 be? This one is a little bit simple because look at the top, 1900, 1905, 1910. Boom, what letter is there? D, you got it. Let's do one more. Electric can opener is created in 1931. So let's go all the way to 1930. And when we think about 31, if we went back, the numbers are getting smaller. So we want to go up, the numbers get bigger. So I'm going to guess it should be K, because if we went to L, we're getting kind of close to 35, right? So K will be a good answer for where 1931 would be. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and continue to answer the rest of these questions as well. And then here's your exit ticket. It looks a lot like the timeline that we practiced on the slides. So this is the civil rights movement. So go ahead when you're done with your other 2 worksheets and answer these questions by yourself. Write your answers over here. On 8, 9, and 10, where it says use the line on the worksheet, you're going to write your answers down here. Okay, not on the side over here. So let's review really quickly what you need to be doing. So if you need help, again, rewatch this video, ask someone at home to help you, or message, call, or text your teacher advisor who calls you during the day on Thursdays and Tuesdays with questions. You can call us, text us, FaceTime me if you want, send us a message on Dojo. Okay, so make sure when you finish each page, you're handing it in to the teacher who calls and does your check-ins. Okay, so you're doing, let's see, one more time. You're doing this paper, and this paper now connected to this video. Okay, so if you have any other questions, just let me know. And have fun working hard. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.